I was thinking as we were singing that song, "There's Nothing Better Than You." What an amazing truth to that song, isn't it? I was thinking to a phrase that often I've used and has guided my life too, and is one of those things that's just been really powerful, is the concept of life is better with Jesus, but Jesus also makes us better at life. And when we just trust Him and follow Him, things go better. It's not like everything works out great. Sometimes there's very difficult. We all face challenges, but there's nothing better than knowing God and walking with Him. And I think in our story of Joshua, which we've been covering in this series, I think that certainly fits. But there are times too when life just seems overwhelming, right? And ever used the phrase, or ever said the words, "I just need a break"? Right? I mean, we all do it from time to time. This is one of those weeks when I felt it. We had the kids' camp on top of everything else, and just a lot of things happening. It all seemed to fall in 1 week, even at the farm with all the hay arriving, and it was a busy, crazy week. And sometimes when you go through those periods of time, you're just like, I just could use a break, right? And some of you are parents, right? You've got the kids home from school, and you've got 2, 3, or 4 kids around, and you're starting to feel that, I could just use a break. Thank you for camp, right? And you got these things that come. I just need a break, right? And those who are working in camp are probably coming out of it saying, now I need to break. Maybe work's overwhelming, and the heat. It's been a hot week this week too. I know I was outside with kids every morning, in the heat, having a great time with them, but it was hot. And maybe with your work, you found that it's been a draining week, and you say, I could use a break, right? We get a break every week. We got the weekend coming, right? And some people went out during COVID and bought cottages, thinking that would be a break for them, right? If I just get away from the city and everything, just go out to the cottage, and then they realize they get out there and they work all weekend out there, and they don't get a break because they're working out there, and they come back and work here, and it's like, I just need a break, right? And you feel that sometimes. And I think on the story of Joshua that we've been going through in the last month, over a month now, and just looking at the busyness of everything they've been doing. I mean, they'd been slaves for a while in Egypt, and then they were wandering through the wilderness, and then then they come to the promised land, the land of Canaan, and they're at war, and it's just like one thing after another, and finally they get there, and it's like, okay, I just need a break, and that's described in the chapters we're going to look at today. I'm taking the biggest chunk of Scripture, chapters 13 to 21. So we've got a big chunk today of 8 chapters that we're going to look at. And the reason I'm taking a big chunk is because I don't want to get lost in the details of this one. There's a lot of you'll see as we get into it. But I'm going to just pick out some of the key things. But first I want to go back and do some review. So last week I showed you this map of the different campaigns that the Israelites went through. When they came out of Egypt as slaves, they came out, they wandered around in the wilderness, and then they came up on the east side of the Jordan River. They crossed over, and they began to possess the land. And that involved some battles at Jericho and Ai. And then in Gibeon, there was a peace treaty signed with those people. And that was kind of the end of the first campaign. Then they take the center of the land. And then the southern nations banded together and attacked Gibeon, who had signed a peace treaty with Israel. They attacked Gibeon, and then Joshua came to their aid and won that battle pretty quickly. And then the second campaign, they moved down and took those cities. And then they turned their eyes to the north part of Israel, and they were met with an army as numerous as the sands of the seashore, it is said. And so they faced off with the king of Hazor, and we talked about that last week. But very quickly, with God fighting for them, they won that battle too. And last week we talked about the question that's just been arising throughout the series: how could a God of love be allowing this kind of conquest going on in the land? And we tried to get some context and some answers to that question. But so we came to that point, and then when the battle was over, the end came, and then the next step, and that's what we move in today. They start to divide up the land. Well, who's going to live where now? We've got this land, and how are we going to live there? And so they divided it up over 12 tribes. I have a map here showing the different areas. It's sort of a funny, some of them much bigger than others. You could tell by the color schemes. But often the primest lands got smaller lands. And this was the map. And you notice there's 12 tribes. There are 12 divisions of land. Over the 12 different sons of Jacob. You say that's why there was... If you know some of the history, it wasn't so much that these were natural division areas, but these were 12 family units, family groupings based on Jacob's 12 sons. He had a big family, and they've been dead for many years, probably 400 years, but they had stayed in family groups and family tribes. And so when they moved into the land, they kind of stayed together in these tribes, and each tribe was given a different area. And that's why there's 12 of these tribes. And there's a reason I'm going quickly through this is because it reads a little bit like a land registry, right? And it's a little bit boring to go through, and yet there's some really key things that I would like to highlight, and I'd like to pull out 5 things that I noticed that kind of jumped out to me. So we'll take a look at each of those 5 significant things as land was being divided. So the first thing I noticed in chapter 13, it says, "But the tribe to the tribe of Levi, he gave no inheritance, since the food offerings presented to the Lord, the God of Israel, are their inheritance, as he promised them." Which is interesting. So of the 12 tribes, one of them did not get land. You think, what? That's kind of a rip-off. I mean, how are they going to build their equity, right? How are they going to survive? And God says, well, you're going to survive because you're going to be working as priests, and you're going to be working in the temple, and you're going to be carrying out the ministry to the Lord, and you will live off of the generosity of God's people. And some people would feel like, but that means I have to live by faith, or I have to rely on other people, or and that can be hard at times. I feel a little bit like that as a pastor, because my salary is dependent on the generosity of the people that give to this church. We don't have grants or other fundings or anything. It's based on and I know it's that way. In ministry, it's that way. Missionaries who go off to the mission field have to raise support, maybe even harder to do, is to go off and raise support. I remember a conversation that I had with my father-in-law, future father-in-law, who's now passed on, but he, when I asked him about marrying his daughter, Pam, he sat me down, because his dad was a minister, and he had gotten into business and made a lot more money, but he grew up with very little in a pastor's home. And so he sat me down with are you sure about this? Had this conversation. Are you sure about what you're going into? There's not much money in it, and are you going to be okay? What about my daughter? And, he was obviously concerned about her, not so much me, and he wondered about me and what I was doing, and I was able to talk to him a little bit about the fact that I had a great upbringing with parents who taught me how to save and invest and how to build and do land and all kinds of other skills. And I said, we're going to be okay. We're going to be, and I was able to talk. We'll be fine, But there's that feeling sometimes, and no doubt the tribe of Levi felt a little bit of that, and they wondered, would God's people come through for me? And of course they did. And at times, I suppose the temple ministry thrived, and they were well taken care of, and at other times, maybe not so much. But that was one of the interesting things, this tribe of Levi. But we say, well, let's go back to the map then. So if there's no Levi mentioned on this map anywhere, but there's still 12 divisions, 12 different colored divisions here. So what's with that? Well, here's the way it worked, because there's no Joseph either. Joseph was one of Jacob's sons too, and there's no Joseph. But Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and they each got a portion. So there's no Levi and no Joseph, but Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's sons, actually had land. So there's still 12 divisions of land, and that's how the way it worked out. Now, the second thing, so that's one thing I wanted to point out. The second thing that I want to point out is there was a message, Caleb. Do you remember Caleb? Caleb and Joshua were two of the spies that went and checked out the land. Moses had sent them into the land before they'd ever come into the land and had them check it out. And they came back, and 10 of the spies says, no, we can't take this land. The cities are too big. The people are too big. The cities are fortified. We can't do it. We can't go in there. We'll just get run out. We'll get killed. But Joshua and Caleb said, no, God is with us, so this will work out. We just have to trust him. Joshua and Caleb were the only two. And so now that they're in the land, and now that they've settled in there, there's a word that from Joshua. And this is what it says. This is what Joshua says. This is what Caleb says. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I am just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then, at 85. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourselves heard then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified, but the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as he said. I love his energy. 85 years old, and he's like, I'm just as ready to, do battle. I'm just an energetic, ready to go. He wasn't slowing down at all at 85. Any of you under 85? Yeah. Sometimes we feel we need a break, and we need a break. And I look at this Caleb guy and say, wow. And another thing I think about him here is that it said, you see the Anakites? In the middle of this verse it says, you yourselves heard then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. You know who the Anakites were? The Anakites, well, in a few hundred years, a guy named David is going to be taking on an Anakite on the battlefield named Goliath. Right? These were giants who lived in lands. So I'm thinking, here's Caleb saying, I'm going to take the giant, I'm going to take the toughest area. And he's 85. I'm thinking, wow. Sometimes it's easy. When we get older, we get a little tireder, and we grow passive. We get overwhelmed maybe easier. Or maybe sometimes the hurts build up because there's been a lot of hurts over life. And we lose, and it saps our energy out, and we just don't know if we have much more to give. And I look at this guy named Caleb, and he didn't have it easy, I'm sure. But he just had this amazing trust in God, and he had the energy to keep going. Then Joshua, it says in the next verse, Joshua says to Caleb, Joshua blessed Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron belonged to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel. See that next word? Wholeheartedly. Wholeheartedly. Lots of passion and lots of energy. It just challenges me. This guy challenges me in my heart, just to stay strong, keep going. And I feel like I've got some good tread left on the tires. And I'm feeling good, and I'm feeling healthy. We've talked about retirement because I'm 65 next year, and it's like, well, maybe it'd be good for the church, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm feeling good. So if it takes 6 months, fine. If it takes 6 years, that's fine. If it takes 20 years, it's like, okay, God, you're good. You're good. Whatever your will. And I just feel like Caleb he's that kind of energetic guy that wants to keep going and take on the challenges. And I pray for your heart, I pray for my heart, that we would not grow weary when it comes to serving the Lord, but we would continue serving Him wholeheartedly. So as I read that, I was challenged by Caleb this week to be wholehearted. It's so easy in our world to be distracted. I feel like this message was for me when I was reading this, because I seem to fail at every one of these points that I'm making today. But this it's so easy to get distracted in the world, isn't it? There's so many things to distract us. I have so many things I love to do, and so many hobbies and things I like to build or work on. And it's like, to be wholehearted was Caleb's. That's where he was at. And God blessed him for it, right? Joshua blessed Caleb because of his wholehearted devotion to the Lord. Probably why he was able to keep going so passionately for so many years. So that's the second thing. The third thing I noticed in these verses, in this chapter, this big chunk of Scripture says in verse 8, chapter 18, "So Joshua said to the Israelites, 'How long will you wait before you begin to take possession of the land the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you?'" How long is it going to take? You see, the problem was they'd gone on in and they'd kind of taken out the main cities, but there was still lots of land and there was lots of towns. And it's like, well, you guys need to go and move into those areas. You need to take possession of them. But 7 tribes were lagging. 7 of the 12 were kind of lagging. And I don't know why. They're lazy. Or maybe they were fearful of going off by themselves. Maybe they were content just to stay at Gilgal. Hey, this is fun. I like being together, Maybe a bit of all those for different people, but they were lagging. And they weren't going and doing what they were told to do. And so Joshua has to confront them and says, go, move into the land, set up your families, set up your homes. And again, this one stopped and made me think, when God called us and planted us here in Stittsville, it was with the command and the energy to reach this community for Jesus. And what are we doing to do that? Have we finished what we started? Obviously not. And there's lots of people here that don't know about Jesus and don't know about God's love, right? And so what are we doing to carry that on and to continue that on? And so this has challenged me again to think about we cannot lag. We have to continue to do what God has called us to do. And then I go into chapter 20, and this is the fourth thing I noticed reading through here. It had to do with these cities of refuge. It says, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, 'Tell the Israelites to designate the cities of refuge as I instructed you through Moses, so that anyone who kills a person accidentally or unintentionally may flee there and find protection from the avenger of blood.'" You see, in the ancient world, it was an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. If you killed somebody, accident or not, you were dead too. Like, it was just, that was the way things worked. And see, we see the beginnings of trials and fair trials and protection and mercy, and God built that into a world that knew nothing about that. And it was part of these cities of refuge. And they set up in the land these 6 cities, designated them safe places, where people could go, find a fair trial, there would be a judge, they would find mercy, they would find justice. Someone would hear their case. And restitution could then be made properly, instead of just as a vengeance of blood. And so as I thought about this is this begins to show us the heart of God, right? His passion for mercy and justice, and his people live as people of mercy and justice. The fifth and final thing that I saw in here that really struck me is in chapter 21. It says, the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors, and they took possession of it and settled there. And the Lord gave them rest. It says, next slide. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their ancestors. Not one of their enemies withstood them. The Lord gave all of their enemies into their hands. And that idea of rest actually pops up in a few verses throughout these 8 chapters. The Lord gave them rest on every side. He gave them peace. He gave them shalom. I was thinking about this too, you know, of all weeks, probably my busiest week of the whole year. And I'm going to, and so maybe that's why this rest concept just popped off the page to me. It's like, okay, yeah, I did not do that at all this week. I had no time. It was a very full week, right? And you have had weeks like that. And so they've come into this land, and God gave them rest. And really, it doesn't really mean that they could put up their feet and do nothing. It was a picture of peace. There was no longer any war. They'd come home. They'd come back to the land of Canaan. And God gave them rest. When I thought about this, I said to myself, you know, this is what we need to do. We have to build rest into the rhythms of our life, right? Rest needs to be a regular part of our weekly plan, monthly plan maybe, yearly plan, even daily plan. Building rest into the rhythms of your life. Yeah, there's a time for war and a time for peace. There's a time to be busy and a time to be quiet. There's a time for labor, and then there's the weekend, right? There's a deep breath. Sometimes we just need to take a deep breath and say, I need some space. I need some margin. I just need to replenish myself. Have you had that lately? Or has life just been too busy? I think anyone who's involved in the camp this week will say, yeah, okay, we've missed that for a little bit, right? And to just have that time to slow down and relax and say, okay. You see, the goal, I think, you know, for these people who had been slaves, they'd been wandering, they'd been at war, and finally, there's rest. And they've had a busy hundreds of years as a nation. And finally, they come to a place where God gave them rest, it says. And it wasn't so much about building their estates and setting up swimming pools, and it wasn't so much about that, but it was a rest in God. Because remember, the Levites didn't have, you know, they didn't have places to, you know, build their estates and set up their farms and everything. And yet they would be able to rest too. It wasn't so much in a place as much as it was to rest in the person of God and to reflect on the faithfulness. Who was it that allowed them to come in and settle here? Who was it that went ahead of them in these battles and opened the doors for them, brought the walls down? Who was it? It was God. God led the way. And he wanted them just to rest and to reflect on the goodness and the faithfulness of their God. And so I asked myself the question, why rest? Why do we need rest? I mean, it's pretty obvious, I suppose, but let me just give you some things to think about. Number one, it honors God's example. Remember in the beginning, it says God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. Why did he rest? Come on, God didn't need to rest. He's God. It's not like he gets tired. He rested as an example for us to set a model for us to follow. That you need to unplug at least once every 7 days, right? To do something different, just to rest from the busyness of life. And so it honors God's example. He designed us and commanded us to build some rest into our lives. Again, I feel like a failure at this many times. But it's what God's starting to and working in my heart and my life. The second thing, why rest? And this is the most obvious one of all. It restores our energy, right? It replenishes our energy and makes us feel better. I read an article that I thought was rather interesting about some of the biggest accidents over the last number of years, like back to even in the Exxon Valdez, Chernobyl, Korean Flight 007, Challenger, even the Challenger spacecraft, and all of these things had to do, there was fatigue, tired, overworked employees was a key part of all of these accidents. Even the Air India this week, or last week I guess it was, crash. Amazing, the one guy survived, right? You heard about the story, but even in that story, they haven't declared what the cause is yet, but some of the stuff is leaked out, and again, it seems to be human error at least, probably based off of fatigue, right, and tiredness. And it's like, why do we let ourselves get so run down and so tired that we can't function properly, right? And God says sometimes we need to stop and we need rest. How do we find that? And maybe how do we get there is the challenge. But we need it to restore our reserves and our energy. The third one, why rest? It helps us to resist this slavery to productivity because it's addictive, at least for me. I love to achieve. I love to do things. I like to build something. I always like to be busy, right? But it can be addictive to go all the time. And I seem to have lots of energy, so I'm pretty good to do that. But I also recognize that it can be addictive, right? And we need some balance, mean margin, especially if we want to hear from God or have time for God. I remember way back in school when I first was introduced with this, at seminary, this idea of taking a day off to do something completely different, and how revolutionary it was for me. You say, no school on this day. I'm just going to, this other 6 days, I'm going to take a day and just do something different. And how restorative that was. And you know what it's like, right? It's not good to live life pedal to the metal all the time, right? Number 4, it builds trust in God's provision. Remember when they moved into the land, they were eating manna, and 6 days a week, and on the seventh day they didn't have any, and they were to collect double amount on the sixth day, but none of the other days, because God was teaching them a pattern. He's teaching them to trust Him. That you don't have to go hard all the time. You need the breaks. And it builds a trust in Him and His provision for us. I mean, I know sometimes it's hard. We get ourselves in messes and we overextend ourselves financially, and stuff happens, right? And there are crises that make this really challenging. So I don't want to downplay this too much, or minimize what you may be going through. But we need to find a way to build this regular rhythm of rest into our lives, right? Because it helps us to trust in God's provision. A fifth thing, it invites joy and worship into our lives. It invites joy and worship into our lives. This idea of a Sabbath principle, or to rest and reflect, it gives us time. And I know that's why you're here, right? You're not at home or at work doing stuff. You're taking some time to stop and reflect on the goodness of God. To read the Scriptures, to read God's Word, and to let it encourage and speak to our hearts. And maybe it's speaking to your heart like it spoke to my heart in a pretty big way this week. Because I kept failing at it. Maybe it'd be more positive for you. But we need it. Sometimes we need to get kicked, and we need to be reminded of these things. And I suspect that may be true for some of you also. And it just gives us time and space to just enjoy life and to worship God, right? When we're not going all the time. And the final and the sixth one is this. It centers us in Christ as our ultimate rest. I always go back to the words of Jesus. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Right? Come to me. Jesus invites. He wants people to come to him, to quit trying to earn your way into heaven, to quit trying to please everybody, but just come to him. Allow him to forgive your sin. Right? That's why he went to the cross, to die for you. And then he ultimately brings you to heaven. All this striving on earth, all the difficulty, all the pain, all the effects of sin that have made life so difficult here on earth, there's a place of rest in heaven. And I imagine there's going to be all kinds of entrepreneurial things for me to do there too, but there'll be rest. Right? And a chance to worship. And Jesus is the one who centers us and calls us to that and gives us the hope for what's ahead. In fact, in a relationship with him, he wants us to know rest, because he will restore and satisfy our soul also, as we allow him to speak into those quiet times of rest. So how are you doing? Think of this. We think of this concept of rest. And if you were to grade yourself on a 0 to 10, how are you doing? Are you nailing this? Are you have a great balance of rest and work, family time and relaxed time and busy projects time? Is it balanced? Do you feel good about your schedule? And what needs to change? I know some of you are thinking, yeah, I'm not even close, right? And I feel like I'm feeling it too, right? This is a reminder from God and his word today that rest matters. It was a goal for his people as they came into this land, and it's his goal for you too. Let's talk to him. Father in heaven, I thank you for this time that we have with you this morning to look into your word. Thank you. It's always got something powerful, even in this land registry sort of boring section of Scripture. There was such powerful truths even in that have spoke into my heart and into my life, and I trust into the people here this morning as we reflect and think about our lives and how we serve you and walk with you. Lord, I just pray that you would, if there are things that need to change, that we would figure out how to do that. God, we would build that into the rest into the rhythms of our lives. Lord, I pray for restoration for the people who are here today. Lord, I just pray that blessing of Joshua over Caleb for the people here, God, just that you would bless them and be with them. And God, you've done so many great things as the people reflected, no doubt, as they sat in the land and just reflected on your goodness. Lord, I just pray that we would do the same this morning and just remember with hearts filled with gratitude all you've done for us, starting with the cross, starting with Jesus dying and inviting us